Hey folks, we're gonna get going here in just a second. I'm just actually gonna refresh my water really quick. I'll be right back. All right, thanks for y'all's patience. Just doing a final system check and getting Slack open on my phone. We're about ready. Cool. If you're in here, go ahead and just leave an emoji in the chat. Just say hi or leave an emoji. Let me know you're here, and that'll help me get a sense that everybody knows where the thread is. If you're from Premium Prep, I posted a link in our Premium Prep Slack channel. The thread is not under that post. That post contains a link to a different place in Slack, and it contains a link to the post where the thread is actually under. So I'm not sure I can post a link to just the thread without being more specific than that. But yeah, you can navigate to, another way to get to it is if you navigate to the study hall channel, which you should have access to. Then you'll see it's just the latest post in that channel. So I want to go over a couple things. I know we got a bunch of newcomers. I think we've got a lot of people who this is like first time to study hall. I think. So just kind of talk about what to expect and what this is about. I kind of do this every study hall, anyways. But yeah, so this is really the reason we do this is sort of to give you all an opportunity to ask me questions, and I can kind of chime in, talk about how I would approach solving a problem, talk about how I would just approach problem solving in general, and I'll kind of take my time to like go through, write tests, work cleanly, talk about how to work efficiently, and talk about more formalizing your workflow and stuff. So that's really the primary purpose. I am wanting to start adding, I made a little post about this in the study hall channel. I want to start adding like little special topics kind of as needed, in part to supplement, just to supplement everything really, just, to kind of fill in the gaps of whatever else, seems like we want to talk about regarding Python. So I do want to keep things aimed at sort of beginner, intermediate Python stuff. Occasionally I'll get somebody asking me a question that might seem really interesting that I'd like to dig into and dive into. But I may occasionally refuse a question and just say, yeah, just connect with me offline and I'll get to that. I'll try to get you an answer as soon as I can. So I may do that at certain times, but in general, yeah, I'm happy to take your questions. It's always fine to ask. But yeah, just so you know, if something kind of feels out of the scope of where I'm trying to focus with beginner intermediate Python, I may choose to take it offline. So since we got a lot of newcomers, I know a lot of people are just starting off with programming, and I figured we'd kind of start with a clean slate with the learn materials, and I actually want to do the previous cohort here. Apologies. This will be April 12th, 2nd. This is the one that I want to be in. Okay. So when I start going through the learn materials, I'm going to basically start them over again, and kind of take it from the beginning and kind of try to keep it mostly paced with where we're at in premium prep. But we can also jump ahead. This is a great venue for you all to ask about functions or other topics that we're not quite to yet in premium prep. So yeah, so let me get this up and running. So I did have a special topic that I wanted to cover today, which is regarding note taking. So this is just a simple note taking strategy that both Tovio and I use. And apologies, God, I meant to get into my Replit. Let me make sure I can actually log into Replit here. 1 second. Let me log in. So I'm going to show this kind of how I would set this up in a number of different environments. I'll show it in Replit, and I'll show it in my environment and in VS Code as well. And I apologize. I'm going to need to find my password for this real quick so I can actually get logged into Replit. I present from the reason I'm not logged in. If you're curious, if you're thinking like, don't you use Replit all the time? The reason I'm not logged in is my main browser for personal and work stuff is Firefox, and I use Chrome just for presenting, just for streaming. So oh my gosh. Okay. I have to do a verification step. I had so much that I was juggling setting up. I just forgot to actually log into Replit. Okay, cool. Get that screen share back. Chrome. And let me kind of pull this into position here because I know you can't see the whole thing. We'll put that on top. Okay. I'll just leave that. I know that's a little small right now. Let me increase the text size. So hopefully that's going to be a little better. Okay, so this is this sort of Replit homepage here. So if you're real new, I I made a post about this in Premium Prep, but I want to reiterate it just to clarify any potential point of confusion around this. We do want you to use VS Code, the expectation in the DSI, and even in a lot of, I mean, VS Code is sort of the industry standard text editor. It's like the text editor right now. So that is the environment that you'll want to ultimately get familiar with and get comfortable with. There are other good environments. Replic's nice because it's really easy to share an editor with somebody else. You can have a shared editor, and if you just want to do a little code together, it's a really great place to start. It's also a really great place. Well, it's a great place to start because it's just a URL. Like you just go to replit.com, and it just it's there's no setup involved as soon as you get something up and going. So I will take it from the top though. Excuse me. I'll do a new REPL. And just to be clear, if you're curious, REPL stands for read, evaluate, print loop. And it's just a shorthand term that we use to describe some quote unquote complete in programming environment. It can be fairly minimal or it can be fairly complex, but a REPL describes at least a minimally complete programming environment, something that where we can read, evaluate, and print and loop, iterate through coding. So basically what that means is kind of what you see in my editor, text editor in a terminal, and that's what you'll see in REPL as well. So we've got, I click create a new REPL, and then I selected Python. You can select from a bunch of other languages, obviously. And then it's going to generate a name, just a random name. This is rich, precious control flow graph. Cool. We'll go with that. Some of them are pretty funny. And then it's going to bring you here. Oh, I saw somebody just deleted a question. I was going to get to that. You can leave that up if you want. Let's see here. So this is going to be your starting place for Uplit. If you haven't gotten up and running, this is kind of where you want to get to. You can come in. I would recommend that you come into settings right here. By recommend, I mean really, it's kind of important that you do this. You can play around with the settings to do what you want, but since we're working with Python and Python treats white space characters as syntactically significant, it's important that we follow the conventions here. So you will, I think in a lot of cases, you'll break your code if you try to use tabs. So many Python interpreters, to my knowledge, if you try to use actual tab characters to format your code, it'll actually just not work. So you want to be on spaces, which it should be. By default, it does an indent size of 2. In languages that don't use white space formatting, you can kind of change the indent size and it's whatever. You can technically use a different indent size with Python, but if you use 2-space indented code and you try to like mesh it up with 4-space indented code, there's a lot of times where it's just not going to be compatible. So 4 is the standard. There are lots of things that are sort of up to a stylistic choice. I would say in Python specifically, or any white space formatted language like Python, indent size spacing is not something that I would say should be a stylistic choice. That's my opinion, but I'm sticking to it. So just stick with the convention of 4-space indent. If you and I ever meet, or if you ever meet with any of us for a mentoring session, we'll need you to change that anyway. So it makes standardizing this pretty nice. Okay, so that's the settings. You can go with a light theme or a dark theme. I'm a dark theme person myself. You can change the position of the terminal. I like it on the bottom, but you can put it wherever you like. And then, yeah, just go from there, do whatever you like. Oh, by the way, the key bindings, the default key bindings, mostly mimic VS Code. So if you learn keyboard shortcuts in Replit, to my knowledge, they will all transfer to VS Code, and they'll be operating system specific, right? So you'll have Mac shortcuts for Mac and Windows Linux shortcuts for Windows Linux. Cool. So up here on the left, you've got this. It's very much modeled, I think, to be VS Code like. You've got this Files tab up here, and then some other things. Just all I'm going to have you worry about for now is the Files tab. And these are files just very much like a directory structure that you'd find on your local machine. And I'm going to kind of get into that and show that in a second here too. So in here, you can add another file, give it a name. You can add another folder or whatever. I'm just going to make a folder, and I'm going to approach this. I'm just going to show you how I would approach this. I'm just going to make a notes folder, and I'll call it notes.py. I said folder, excuse me, I meant file. So we'll have a notes.py file. And basically, I mean, you can call it whatever you want. I call it notes.py because that's what I called it when I first started programming, and that's just the name that stuck for me. So this is how I approach this single file note-taking approach. It's funny, Tovio and I both arrived at this sort of note-taking approach independently of each other. We were having a conversation one day, and Tovio mentioned, like, yeah, I want to get people, or I want to recommend to people that they keep all their notes in a single file. And I'm like, that's funny. That's exactly what I do. So it's kind of cool. And I think it might seem like very particular, and I'm not sure that I can totally explain its utility perfectly. But it's something that I recommend. Give it a try. If you really don't like it, then you can do something else that makes sense for you. So what I do, oops, let me actually, oh, why are these like this? I wanted, one second here. I wanted these other ones. Prep, source, Python. I think it should just be this one. Yeah, these are the ones. Okay, these are just slightly different. I'll throw these in to Slack as well. So what this is just these are comment switches. What it means is, and this is what I like to do. I'm not sure exactly what Tovio likes to do. I bet they have a lot of good tips for you as well. But this is just how I use it. You don't have to use comment switches like this. You can just throw everything in there. But I like to do this because it creates a clear barrier between different snippets of my code. So basically what this is, and I'll just pare this down to one of these for now. What this allows me to do is comment, I'll do two of them, comment out some part of my code. So let's say, and this is my actual notes document. This is literally my notes document. You can see I have a couple useful, just quick reference stuff here. I have some just bodies of text to copy paste in real quick if I want to do some text processing. I have these extra comment blocks which I can copy paste. So it's sort of like, I think about it kind of like a painter's palette, right? Like just little things, the little colors and little useful tools, bits of snippets of code that I might want to reference later. And you can see, if you look through my notes document, there's a lot. And it just, like, every time I do a little bit of coding, I'm just playing around, trying out a new technique, doing something, whatever. See, we're up to, oh wow, we're up to Oh, that's 1900. Yeah. Yeah, I was like, this is a relatively new document, but that's actually pretty, I'm building this up pretty quick. I've had this computer only for like a month now, and it's 3,000 lines of code in my notes document. I will tend to cycle them out and make a new one every 10,000 lines of code because my editor starts to get slow when it opens a file with like 15,000 lines of code in or whatever. So for me, that takes 1 to 3 or 4 months, depending on how much I'm filling up my notes document. But basically, and I'll kind of show you in Replit here, basically what I like to do is, let's say one day I write a factorial function, and then the next day I write how should I do this? Yeah, let's say I write these factorial permutations, combinations, functions here on one day, and then here I'll just copy, make a new one of these, put this up at the top. I should have done it that way. And then some other day I have like another project and I just want to like store it somewhere, right? I just want to kind of archive. I did a little bit of work and like maybe there's something in here that I want to reference. I did a little bit of work, so I just want to archive it, right? So this notes document is my archive of all the code that I've done. Anything that I think I might want to look at that later, I'll put it in here. And then the cool thing about this is, I don't need this down here, excuse me. The cool thing about this is I can just deactivate this with this comment switch. I can just leave it deactivated. And then this is sort of a unit, right? It's like one little lesson, right? And if I'm trying to explore a specific topic, I might take some notes on this, right? Right. So calculates the number of permutations. I might take another note, like, n is like the total number of elements I have to choose from, and R is the group size, something like that. I might give a little explanation here and there. So it becomes my own documentation, and it's just a single source of truth for like all the coding that I've ever done. The cool thing is, if you're working on something, and whether it's working or not, whether you get it working or not, if you move on to something else, just regardless of its state, just copy paste it and throw it in your notes document, however you want to keep things, and that will sort of keep it archived, and you can go reference it later. And I've found that it's actually a really good way. There's times where I'm like, oh yeah, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was working on this thing and I don't remember how to do it, but I have my notes document, so I'll just go through and try to locate it. And yeah, it's pretty great. So let's see. I feel like somebody's going to ask. So I feel like I have to explain these comment switches. I don't want to get too hung up on that, but basically, I'm using single line and multi-line comments together. So I'll make a multi-line comment, right? So let's say I have print hello, right? Here's my first line, and then print world, I don't know, something like this. So I can put this in a multi-line comment like that, and then it's commented out, right? So if I comment this out, I have this problem where I have this this ending quote mark that now doesn't have a pair, right? So this thing that ends the multi-line comment is just sitting there. It doesn't know if I'm creating a new multi-line comment and not ending it properly. So like I have this delimiter that doesn't have a paired delimiter to go with it. So this is actually going to give me a syntax error if I try to run this. Oh no, wow, okay, that's valid code. That's kind of crazy. Oh, let's see. No, this is running. I'm sorry. This is running in my main.py document. So let me actually go over to main.py here. I'll hit run. Okay, so there's my syntax error. So here's the syntax error. And if I want to solve this, I can just put a comment in front of this. And then since this one is commented out, when I go to uncomment this, it goes through and it actually uses this as the ending delimiter of the multi-line comment, right? So this is all that's going on, right? I just make sure that when the top one is in a single line comment, the bottom one also is in a single line comment. That way, both of the delimiters for the multi-line comment are commented out. And that means I can just comment out this first line here, and it's clear what's happening. So just to make it more visually clear what's happening, I just put a bunch of hashes here, and I'll put a bunch here, right? Something like that. And then every time I want to make a new comment block, I just duplicate that, and I've got a new comment block. I can delete that and make a new one, right? So I can comment out a whole group of code without having to select it and figure out like where does it begin and end that I want the comment to start and stop, and I can just comment it out like that. And then I have this little note here that just says uncomment. I can say uncomment this line to activate or deactivate, something like that. Cool. So like I said, let me throw those in Slack really quick. There's a comment switch. You can feel free to use that one if you want. Okay, looks like we got a few questions. It's kind of a source code library. Yeah, it's like a big bulk, kind of a dumb archive. But the dumbness of it is actually kind of what's useful. The fact that it's in a single file means you have a single source of truth. It's just a simple thing to deal with. You can, do bulk search through it, and in text editor, there's advanced searching features. You can find stuff. Makes it really nice to deal with. Somebody's saying, I noticed in Replit that you can only run code in the main, yes, in the main.py file, not other Python files. For example, you can run your print statement in notes.py. So this is kind of a funny thing where, getting a little bit out of the scope of this, if you want to run a different file, like if I wanted to actually run here, why don't I do this? I'll show you how to run a different file. So when you click the run button, it's true. What's being said here is true. It's only going to target the main.py file, but I can actually run code from another file by importing it. So I can say import notes, and I don't have to say notes.py. I don't have to say where it is in relation to main because they're in the same directory. So if it's a Python file, which it needs to be because I can only import other Python files, to my knowledge. So if it's a Python file and it's in the same directory, you can just do this. Import the name of the file without the extension. And to be clear, the extension is not optional. It's not like I can say main.py if I wanted to. Necessarily, the extension has to be left off. So just import notes. And if I run this, all I need to do literally is import notes, and it will run. So if I run this, now it'll run the stuff in notes. This is actually very similar to how I execute my code locally. The cool thing about this is, like if I have, let's say my library.py, I can just, and usually what I do is I do this def main like this, and then if name equals folder. I'm not going to get into the weeds of what all this is, but this is a formal way. There's a lot of formality here about this is kind of a formal way of executing, sort of semi-formal. You don't usually do your imports in a function like this, but that's what I do in just like my like mess around folders or just presentation folders that I code out of to present to people. So yeah, that's all that's going on there. Cool. So now I could run code out of either of these, and if I wanted to run code out of only one of them, I could just comment out the ones that I don't want to run. And this is basically what I do for like a directory to just play around in. So actually, let's I'll show you how to set all that. And then somebody's also asking, let me make sure I get through all the questions. What shortcut key combination are you using to comment in Replit, or are you just removing the hashes? So if you're on Linux or Windows, it's going to be Control and then the / key, or the key with the question mark on it in most keyboards. Control / is the key shortcut. On Mac, I believe it will be Command and /. That keyboard shortcut is like a universal in every language that I've ever worked in every text editor that I've ever worked in. On Mac or Windows or Linux, that's been the case. That keyboard shortcut holds. Okay, not in every, actually. I can think of a couple weird editors that I've used where that doesn't use that. But for any mainstream editor, that's a pretty standard shortcut. So yeah, Control / or Command / if you're on Mac. And that'll be true, like I said, that'll be true in VS Code as well. So yeah, so let's kind of get away from Replit here. Yeah. Let's see. Let me push this down, and we'll kind of get away from that for now. I'll just leave that. There we go. Okay, so I'll show you like my directory here. This is, I already showed it to you. This is my notes folder, and like I said, what I like to do is just keep some usefuls up at the top. Like these things are things that I use frequently enough with students that sometimes I just want to have it like on hand, so I can just copy paste it into a shared replit, and we can just kind of start working from there. Often I'll have somebody build it, or I'll just build it really quick. But in case I need to just copy paste it really quick, I use these 3 functions enough that I just want them kind of on demand. And then this is there's a lot of problems that involve some element of text processing, and I just need kind of a lorem ipsum. This isn't lorem ipsum, obviously, it's English. It's a famous poem by Robert Frost that you've probably all heard. I don't have any particular connection to this poem. I just literally one day I was like, I need to do some text processing, so I looked up I forget why I didn't want to use lorem ipsum, but I actually like using just like a short poem or something, because you actually kind of it makes language processing make a little more sense. It's a little more intuitive when you're actually using words, and you have repeated words. You can see this has punctuation, and I have another version without punctuation in case I just want to focus on something without punctuation. And then I've got all my stuff, and it's in these comment boxes here. This is a funny problem that I was doing, and I'm just formatting everything in a very particular way. All the spacing isn't syntactically significant. It's just that way because, yeah. Oh, and it's all broken for some reason. But yeah, anyways. So at any point, I can just look through here. You can just start going through this. And it looks like I've got some kind of problem there. Not really sure what that's about. I wonder if I have something. Oh, does that need to be? That's interesting. Well, at any rate, I might have a little issue to debug in there somewhere. But yeah, so I can just look through here and just find all the stuff that I've done fairly recently. Okay. So let's talk about, so you can kind of see how to create it in Replit. You don't have to do this thing with main.py. What I really recommend, at least if you're starting out, just like run your code, work out of main.py directly, and then you can use your notes document as sort of a point of reference. And then when you want to run something, you can just copy paste it into your main.py and run it in there, do whatever you want from there. But if you did want to kind of plug everything in together, you could do this. So I'm going to go over how to start a startup directory like the one that I have here, and we'll look at it through the GUI, and we'll look at how to do it from the GUI and how to do it from your terminal and text editor, and I'll show you in Atom and VS Code as well. And I do have VS Code up here, so I wanted to show this. I know I use Atom, but I recommend everybody use VS Code. So it's kind of a funny thing. I'm like, yes, I'm using Atom, but I want you to use VS Code. But I wanted to show you like how similar they are, right? The reason I'm using Atom and I feel okay about using Atom is the way I use it. I use basically pretty vanilla plain text editor features. I don't use any like really weird extensions or anything that do anything particular with Python. I just use the text editor just as a pretty straightforward text editor, and then I have a terminal in here. I have some tabs, and VS Code has the same functionality built in. You can see I've got a text editor up here and a terminal. It's the same thing. Excuse me. If you want to, I know a lot of people like to use VS Code as sort of a GUI heavy tool. In general, I prefer to do my programming as much from a sort of command line like environment as possible. And mostly that's not, I mean, part of it is that, it's the command line is a central tool to my profession, and I want to get as much practice with it as I can. Like I want to just, it gives you an excuse to learn it and practice it. And another is when you're sitting and typing and writing code for hours, it can be a lot to like move your hand and then move to the mouse and then move your hand and then move to the mouse and then keyboard mouse. Like this can get to be a really strenuous cycle. So having the terminal just keeps my hands on the keyboard more, and I'm not like navigating my project with my mouse or my trackpad as much. I still do use a mouse as part of my workflow, and I switch to it sometimes, but I want to get away from like a workflow where I'm like type mouse, type mouse, type mouse, type, like if I reach for my mouse occasionally, it's not a big deal, but I don't want it to be like every time I want to run my code or every time I want to like find a new file, I want to basically stay on my keyboard. So that's really the reason. But if you do want to use VS Code, you want to use the GUI, it's, gives you a nice, obviously sort of a lower bar to entry. You can kind of navigate your project like this. So this is my project directory here, and let me see. Oh, I should have showed how I got here. So let's see if I close this. how can I remove this? Hide, sidebar, remove, outline. Can I just remove folder from workspace? Okay, let's try this. No? Is it this one? Remove. Oh, okay. I'm not, see, I don't use the GUI. I don't use VS Code daily, and B, I don't use, if I did, I wouldn't use the GUI, I'd use the terminal anyway. So I don't off the top of my head remember how to like change that directory. But when you first start it up, it'll give you this option like open a folder, and you can navigate to a folder, make sure that the folder is the thing that's highlighted when you click open. And if there's a file in that folder that's highlighted, it'll open just that file. So you want to make sure the whole folder that you want to open is the thing that's highlighted. Then you click open, and then it'll open in the sidebar there. And there's ways to like add stuff to this. I think there's a add folder to workspace. So I could like go through, and I'm not sure if that's coming up. No. So unfortunately, OBS isn't picking this up, but I have like a menu in front of me now, and it's sort of a different window. So I guess that's why it's not picking it up. But I have a menu of other folders that I could add. So the way to get to that, you'll right click in here and then add folder and go from there. You could add another folder, kind of keep your projects in the GUI there. But like I said, I'm going to you can use that if you want. I'm going to demonstrate and sort of encourage you and teach from a place of using the terminal as the primary sort of project management tool. Okay, cool. So everything that I'm showing in VS Code there is basically how I'm using Atom. So it's just, you can see it's a very, very similar tool. And the way that I use them is, and encourage you to use them and try to teach, is very similar enough that like anything you see me do, aside from a specific keyboard shortcut or something, is probably going to translate over one-to-one. And the reason the keyboard shortcuts won't is that I customize my keyboard shortcut file, and it's not going to translate to anybody's workflow but mine. So anyways, so let's get into this. How would I create this directory? So if you're just starting and you want to start up with a directory and get a project up and running, let me see, where is it? Here it is. Oh, that's below there. There we go. So this is my file manager. I am in Linux, so your file manager is obviously going to look different than mine. But I've got all my files, my home folder here. So I trust that you all know how to open a Finder or Explorer in your respective your file manager on your respective operating system, and kind of navigate around it. So you don't have to follow this exactly, and this is going to be kind of very much the way I organize things. This is my home folder, which is a folder that every user has in a Linux or any Unix system. Actually, Mac has it, although it kind of abstracts it a little more. So the way where I would like to put things is in this projects folder, which is a folder that I created. So I'll come into projects, and then in here, I could just make a new project or something. But let's do this. I'll do this on the desktop just for fun. And I've got a bunch of desktop folders here. So I'm on my desktop, and you could do this. You could right click on your desktop and just create new folder. Obviously, your operating system will probably look different than mine. And then we could say, I like to call it projects. You could, of course, call it stuff, or even things, or whatever you want. But let's see, what should I call it? Python projects, something like that. So we'll make this projects directory, and then in here, you could break it into like other subfolders or whatever. But basically, I could create a new text file, and I just realized, is that, oh gosh, I have these little right-click menus that OBS is not picking up, but I didn't anticipate that it wouldn't do that. So, sorry. So, not that I guess it's going to look different on your operating system, anyways. But I'll just make a new folder, which you can do from right-clicking on any OS. You probably know how to do that. So I'll call this notes.py, and there's my notes.py file. And then I can do another one, text file. We'll call this main.py. And let's do another one, new text file. It'll be lib.py. So these are usually the files that I like to have around. Then from here, I'll just leave that there, and let's just pretend like let's just pretend like I just opened my text editor and I don't have any files open in it. So we'll just start totally from scratch here. So empty text editor. I'm going to open my terminal. If you're in VS Code, the keyboard shortcut to do that on Linux and Windows will be Control and backtick, actually, to open your terminal. I think also on Mac, if you do, it's either Command J or Command Shift J will open your terminal on a Mac. So anyways, open up your terminal, and I'll cd to my home directory. So now I'm going to navigate. I just navigated to create these files in my GUI. I'm going to navigate into this directory from my terminal here. So I'm going to use the cd command. Now this is bash. If you're on a Mac, these commands are almost certainly going to work for you. Or if you're on Linux or a Mac, it's going to work for you. If you're on Windows, Windows uses PowerShell. So you're going to have to learn your own shell environment. I can't cover that here, but we'll just do cd for change directory, and then I'll hit tab, and I'll go to, let's go to, where was it? Desktop. I haven't saved anything on my desktop in years. So then default, and then Python projects. So I'm hitting tab to sort of do these auto completes and kind of show me what's in the directory. Okay, so now I'm currently in this directory. This terminal has been navigated to this directory from my GUI, right? So they're both, I'm viewing the directory in the file manager, and I'm viewing it in the terminal as well. So from here, I'll say Atom, and if you're using VS Code on a bash shell terminal, Linux or Mac, I mean, the code, or excuse me, the command will be code. If code doesn't work for you, you'll need to add it to your path, which is kind of a thing. But presuming that it does work, you'll say code and then the name of the files that you want. So I'm not using VS Code, so I'll say Atom, and then I can say one of these files. So I'll just select main, and I'll hit enter, and then it's going to open it up, right? So you can see this is kind of the paradigm here. I like to use the terminal for all that kind of stuff, all that like opening files and changing through different directories. If I want to open all the files, I can just say star. It'll work for VS Code as well. You can see it opened up the other ones as well. If I want to delete a file, I can say rm for remove, and then a file name. So I'll do rm lib there. You can see it removed that file. It propagated right away and updated. Remove that file from the directory. If I want to create it, the command to create a file is touch lib.py. I'll do touch, and then it's created again. Let me remove it. Another way to create it, and usually the way I'll create a file is I'll just say atom, because I usually want to edit it right away. Like I need another file with this name, and I also need to open it. So I'll just say atom lib.py. Oops. So let's try that again. So currently there's no lib.py. So I'll say atom lib.py, and that will, you see it opened up a new file called lib.py. VS Code has a similar thing to this. There's a little blue circle that tells me this file is not saved. Notice it's not here yet, right? There's nothing in here yet. So what I need to do is just save it. And for me, that's Control S. And as soon as I save it in my editor, it saves and now it exists. So that's usually what I do. So that's how you can create and remove, create and delete files and move around in your terminal. There's quite a bit more to the terminal than that. I don't want to make this only about that. Cool. We have somebody saying that my VS Code terminal type states ZSH, and you only have PowerShell. Yeah, so Windows users, you're not going to have ZSH or Bash. You're going to have PowerShell. I can't demonstrate that because I don't have a Windows machine. I don't actually even own a Windows machine. Not that I have some stigma against it. I would. I just, it's on the list of many things that I want to buy. So I have a Linux machine, and that's what I like. And I have a couple Macs laying around. So I'm familiar with Bash, and that's what I can demonstrate here. So unfortunately, if you're on a Windows system, you're going to have to look up, like, I would look up like a PowerShell tutorial, and I would look up how to move around changing directories, how to create and delete and open in whatever editor of your choice, VS Code, folders and files. So that's what I would do. Cool. And I forgot to mention, if I wanted to, let's see, if I wanted to open this whole folder, and this will work for VS Code as well, you'll say code, and then the folder name that you want to open, and this should, oops. Oh no, it opened it as a new window. Sorry, that's not coming through. That's annoying. Let me see if I can do this. -A. Is that going to do it? Okay, that did it. Yeah. So this will open it in the project window, and the same command will work for VS Code. You'll just say code instead of atom. You may or may not need the -A if you want it to open in the same window or a different window, but I know -A will work also for the same purpose in VS Code. Cool. So I'm just going to remove that. I want to remove it. Remove project folder. Okay, there we go. Cool. So that's that. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that can help get you like up and running. I do want to be clear. Ultimately, you're going to want to get a local environment. You're going to want to get VS Code up and running, and that will become your primary development tool is VS Code. Sorry. it does take a while to get it set up and to get everything kind of comfortable and feeling good. So, don't worry if it doesn't come totally naturally right out of the gate. There's legitimately a lot to it. So I'm going to open up my files again. Okay. Cool. All right. Let me catch up on questions here. I hope we didn't leave anybody hanging. Looks like we're good to go. Yeah. We've got about 30 minutes left for the usual study hall time. I'm not seeing any standing questions. Feel free if you've got something from Learn you'd like me to go through from the Python stuff in Learn. Feel free to put that in there. You can include your code, include a link. I know I've said this a few times, but please include a link so I can find it right away and actually give an answer to the question. And then, yeah, so since I'm not seeing anything now, we can just go through the material. Yeah. Let me get this kind of squared away here. Oops. Okay. So let's see. I will. Just thinking of where to start. I have a little pivot. So, thinking we could go through. You gotta either go through the material or kind of go through an overview. I would really like to go through like a sort of language overview at some point, but I might just do that in Premium Prep. Or I want to do that in Premium Prep tonight at the beginning of class, so I don't want it to be too redundant. I think everybody in here is in Premium Prep, I believe, from what I'm seeing. Of course, I might be wrong on that. So, yeah. I guess we'll just jump in with something. Let's just go to Python basics. Okay, cool. So this is kind of going to be a little bit of review, but hopefully reinforce like what we talked about yesterday. If you're from Premium Prep, which I know a lot of you are, maybe this will just kind of help reinforce what we talked about yesterday. So this is going to cover common data types, int, float, and bool. So integers and floats are our numeric types. These are the types that we think of when we think of regular numbers and dealing with numbers. So integers are whole numbers. They can be positive or negative. They just have to have they don't have any fractional components. So they're whole number values. Floats are the term used for a number that has a fractional component to its value, and it's expressed not as a fraction, but as a decimal. We just don't use the term decimal because that term is specific to base 10, and we don't want to offend any of the other bases since we love all of them and we use all of them. So, cool. Booleans are technically a numeric type. Excuse me. Booleans are technically a numeric type. but they don't have like they don't they don't look like numbers in the same way, right? So when we write down a Boolean value, it's either true or false. These are the two possible Boolean values, just true or false. And it's important to understand because certain portions of our code we will write in such a way so that they will evaluate to true or false expressions, and they'll give us Boolean values back, and that'll help us control what our program does, right? So if we check some certain condition and we find that condition to be true, maybe when that condition is true, we'll run some specific part of the code, and if that condition is false, then we won't run it. So there's a lot of places it comes up. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Technically, it is a numeric type. That will kind of come up later, but for now, just remember that it is a numeric type. Doesn't really matter why, but we talked about the type function yesterday. We talked about type and print. So if I want to, excuse me, if I want to print something out, printing just makes something visible on the console. So if I want to print out 5 plus 3, I'll say IPython. main.py. So 5 plus 3 is 8, so we get 8 printed out to the console. Cool. And I just realized I just turned on my fan. It's getting a little hot in here, but I hope that's not adding a lot of noise. Let me know if there's too much background noise. I know this mic can be a little funky, and I think it's got like a ground problem. I'm trying to get it replaced, get an actually nice microphone. So apologies if the audio is a little weird, but if that fan noise is too much, just let me know and I'll turn it back off again. Cool. So yeah, print will just make something visible. It just writes it to the console. And type will give me the type of some expression, right? So 5 plus 3 expresses 8. So just looking at 8, it looks like an integer, but let's confirm that because sometimes looks can be deceiving. But this time it's not because it sure is an integer. There's a high pitch whirring this whole time. Okay, dang. I'm trying to get that. Issue resolved. I think it's picking up some ground leak or something. I don't quite know what's causing that, but yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. And it's not the fan, unfortunately. I will get that problem resolved someday. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But probably this year. Probably this month, actually. Anyways, okay. So that's print and type. Let's just read through this. The integer type is used for many things in Python, most notably counting. Integers take discrete values like -25 or 142. There's no integer value between 3 and 4, for example. Integers can be added and subtracted. We can use the standard mathematical operations. Floating point numbers, as discussed, have decimal values associated with them. Cool. Boolean type, true and false. Yeah, I suppose it's worth mentioning this just in regards to the Booleans being technically a numeric type. So The Boolean type can also be represented using integers 1 and 0. So one thing, and I'm going to get into this. I'm going to get into this in tonight's premium prep as well. So we can. There's something that we can do called casting, and perhaps a more descriptive term for it would be like converting. Converting one type to another type. So not every type can be converted to every other type. Sometimes a given value of a type will prevent it from being converted. But like sometimes, like with strings, for example, sometimes we can convert strings to, or we can cast strings as integers or floats. And sometimes we can't. It depends on the contents of the string, the exact value of the string, but we'll kind of get into that later. So let's get into a bit of casting. So if I have 5.38 or whatever, some floating point number, let's print that off. Well, that's not surprising. It's 5.38. But if I wanted to cast this as an int, so there's another function called int. And let's do the IPO for int. So input is anything that can be cast as an int, and that can be like defining exactly what that is. Might take a paragraph or two, so I'll just leave it at that. Anything that we can cast as an int. The process, again, I don't care about, and the output, or the return, maybe more accurately, the return is of type int. It outputs an int of approximate equal let's say approximately equal to the input. So let's look at that, right? So this is going to approximate the input. 5.38 is approximately 5. It's close to 5. So basically, it's just going to truncate any float. If we pass it a float, it's going to truncate that float value into an integer, right? So here's an interesting one. I'll give you all 30 seconds for this one. So I've got 5.38. I'm going to cast it as an int. And you get 5. What happens if I cast it back to a float? What am I going to get on the output here? And to be clear, a completely acceptable way of answering this question is to type it into your REPL of your choice and see what happens. See if we get any answers for this one. Go ahead and put it in Slack when you get it. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so this is going to give us 5.0, right? So, and I wanted to do this to sort of be clear about this, right? Because I could see this being, you have this number 5.38, you cast it as an int. What happens if you cast it back as a float? I could see somebody saying, "Oh well, we'll get the 3/8 back," but we lose that fractional component. It degrades out of there. So if that floating point number is important with its fractional component, you would need to save that into a variable so you could access it later. So 5.0. Cool. So, and this is what's going to happen anytime I floatify an int, right? So if I have 42, 42.0, same value, different type. Cool. Yeah, and I wanted to talk about this actually in the case of bools, right? So there's another type, bool, so we can convert. I think you can convert every type that I'm aware of in Python. You can convert you can cast as a bool. At least every built-in type. I mean, I'm not sure about the ones that aren't in the standard library. That might not be the case, but for every built-in type that I'm aware of, you can cast it as a bool. And there's sort of different rules about when that's going to be true or false, right? So with a number, if the value is equal to 0, that is, if it's 0 or 0.0, it's going to be false. Under all other circumstances, positive or negative, it's going to be true, right? So if I have negative 0.3, that'll be true. 0.00003, it'll still be true, right? Even though it's, if you saw that number, you or me saw that number, we'd probably be like, well, that's just 0. But Python's not going to round to at least to this level of precision. So any number that's not equal to 0 is going to be true, and any number that's equal to 0 is going to be false when we cast it as a bool. And likewise, you should probably ask what happens int if I cast true as an integer. I get 1. Let's do this. False. I mean, can you guess? 0. Surprise, surprise, right? And we would have the same thing for, oops. Yeah, print has an int in it. Same thing for a float as well, 1.0 and 0.0. Cool. All right, let's do the challenges. Let's do these. So what will the following code output? So the type of -7, we have, it could be an int, it could be a float, or it could be a bool. So it looks like an integer because it doesn't have a fractional component. It's a negative number, but that's fine. Ints and floats can be negative. It's not true or false. I don't see true or false in here, so it's not a bool. This idea of being able to cast things as bools and cast bools as other things. Sometimes this is referred to as truthiness or falsiness, right? So a given value, not a given type, but a given value is truthy or falsy, right? So for numbers, 0 is falsy, not 0 is truthy. So this is not 0, so that's truthy. But just because it's truthy doesn't mean it's literally true. If I cast it to a bool, it would be the value true. So it's not a bool. And then it doesn't have a fractional component, so it's not a float. So we'll go with int. 7 point nothing. Well, 7 point. All right. All right. I thought that was an error. I thought that was going to give me an error. Yeah, okay, that's kind of funny. I always do this thing. It's my habit. If I have a something 0.0, like I will put in the 0. It doesn't look right to me unless there's a 0. If I have 0 point something, I won't say like 0.5. I'll say 0.5, and that's sort of a coding style choice. You can see that Python kind of does the same thing, but I looked at that. I'm like, that should be a syntax error, but nope, it's valid. So that'll be a float. Okay, cool. So what is the following code output? So I didn't talk about Boolean operators. I was going to kind of save this for premium prep. Let's just cover it now, though. It'll be a little bit redundant to what we're going to talk about tonight, but that's fine. Can't get too much of this stuff. So Boolean operators. Or there's another name for these. Comparison operators, where we can compare two things. We can compare the values. So I could say, is 4 equal to 5? And if I want to compare the equality of two things, I use this double equals sign, right? So remember when we were talking about variables, I say a equals some value. Let's say a equals 4. I'm trying to train myself out of this. Technically, this is not equals. I always say equals. It's kind of a bad habit. I'm not really supposed to say this is a equals 4. We're really supposed to say is a gets 4. So this is an assignment. This is the single equals operator is the assignment operator. It's not the equality operator. So this does not check equality. It sets assignment, right? It says 4, the value 4 is assigned to the variable called a. Somebody's asking a question. May I ask a question about a problem in a later unit? Yes, please. Absolutely. That's what we're here for. I'm running into an error. I'm having trouble understanding. Yeah. Feel free to pop in a link. If you have any code you want me to troubleshoot, you can pop that in there as well. I'll finish this. I'll give a quick spiel about the Boolean comparison operators. It'll be pretty quick, and then I'll take your question while you're getting that up and ready. So anyways, I was talking about the assignment operator versus the equality operator. So a single equals assigns a value to a name. Gosh, I did not clean my glasses. I thought I did not. A double equals checks equality. So what this does, this is a completely different kind of operation. And it always yields a true or false answer, right? So why don't I do this? A equals 5. I'll use the variable. So a equals 5. There we go. So that's false. A is not equal to 5. Let's do B equals 5. And we'll just do this, A and B like this. So A is not equal to B. If I make them equal, A equals 5, B equals 5, then that's true. We can also check inequality. We can check if two things are not equal. And this is just basically the opposite. But there are times when it's doing one and not the other makes whatever you're doing a lot easier. So you might think, oh, well, I'll just always use equality because it's sort of an easier concept rather than not equality. But definitely, anytime you're looking at some code and you're considering, should I check equality, just consider whether it would be easier to check inequality, because sometimes it is. Often, I mean, well, about half the time it is. About half the time, like writing your code with one of these will be a little easier than writing it with the other. I digress. So we can check equality with equals equals. We can check inequality with exclamation point equals. A common mistake that I see people make is they'll say equals exclamation point. You can see my syntax highlighting gets kind of messed up here. This is not the same operation. So pay attention to your syntax highlighting. It's probably, if it looks funky, if it looks off, if it looks uneven, it's probably telling you that your code is messed up in some way. If you don't trust the syntax highlighting for some reason, and occasionally on Replit, their syntax highlighting can get confused and needs a little shake sometimes. If you don't trust the syntax highlighting and you think it's highlighting something erroneously, comment out the line and uncomment it again. And sometimes that'll force the parser to reanalyze the highlighting, and sometimes that'll fix a small issue. But in this case, you can see the highlighting still stays messed up. So I have this issue. So if you have a problem like this, if you get this syntax error, it says invalid syntax, and you're using an operator with 2 characters, just try flipping the characters around, and that'll tell you, right? So let's just do, I'll get away from A and B here. I'll do 4 and 5, and we'll do 4 and 4. So 4 equals 5 is false. 4 equals 4 is true. And then the opposite for inequality. There you go. Cool. Then we can compare. So these equal to or not equal will work with numbers. They will also work across many other data types. Like we can see if one string is equal to another string when we get into lists and dictionaries or things like that. We can see if one dictionary is equal to another dictionary, or one set is equal to another set. We can see, so we can use equality and inequality across a wide variety of types. But we also have some numeric types, or numeric, excuse me, comparison operators that we have some comparison operators that only work with numbers. So that's going to be less than, equal to, or excuse me, less than. Let me try this. Okay, 3rd time's a charm. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal, less than or equal. So 4 greater than 5 is false. 4 greater than 3 is true. 4 greater than 4, that's going to be false. 4 is not greater, it's equal, right? And then let's do the same thing for less than. So 4 less than 5 is true. 4 less than 4 is false. 4 less than 3 is false. And then the same thing goes for I'll break these up into their own little areas. Greater than or equal just changes the equality condition to true here. Same thing here. Less than or equal changes the equality to true. Cool. All right. So that's a little table that you can reference for that, and we'll be getting more into those. We're close to the time, so I am going to, I promised I would take this question. I won't leave you hanging. I'll take this question, and if there's any follow-up question for this, that's like If you have questions about my solution or whatever, that's fine. We can chat about it and kind of dive into it a little bit. But I'll call last call. Well, I'll cut it off for questions. This will be the last question, and then once we're through this, we'll wrap up for the day. Okay. Sorted and reversed. Okay, cool. And the question is, I'm getting lost with what it says my list is. List reversed iterator object at memory address. Yeah. Okay. I already know what this is about. So this lesson is about the sorted and reversed functions, and it pertains to lists. So if you're not quite at lists yet, we're kind of getting into intermediate stuff. So hang out and watch, because you'll get into this stuff pretty soon. So even if you're not quite there yet, it'll make sense. This will help when you start diving into that as well. So we have a list, and we want to say, let's do something like 4, 3, 5. Okay, so this is unsorted. If I print my list, big surprise, it's going to print the list. If I print the sorted list, it's going to print the sorted versus going to sort the list and print it out, right? And I have some options about how I can sort it or whatever, but let's use the regular sort. And then just to be clear, if I print the list again, it's back in its unsorted form. So sorted doesn't actually change the list. It doesn't mutate the list. It just gives me the sorted version of it back. And it actually gives me a different object. It's a different list, not a different kind of object, a different object that's not the same as the one that I passed to it, right? So this gives me a different list that has the same values, just in a different order, because it's sorted. Okay. So you look at this and you're like, okay, well, that's how sorted works. So that's got to be how reversed works as well, right? And reversed works a little bit differently, right? So we've got this outlier here. So reversed gives you what's called an iterator object, which, if you'll notice, is not a list. It doesn't look like a list, but it kind of looks like it should be. So if you're looking at something like this and you want it to come out in list form, probably to print it, or I don't know if you have some other list operation, you can cast it as a list like this. So this gets back into casting. So you can use the list function, just pass it in there, and you'll get a list out, and that works fine. So if we look, 435 is my initial list. 534 is the reverse of that. So the reason that it's built this way, you might look at that like, okay, well, I know how to resolve it, but like, what a pain. Like, why, like, everything's a list and then you just have a reverse iterator object. So the reason is, this does not, so an iterator object in memory is an object that essentially has the logic built into it to iterate through something, right? And that's all it is. So it's essentially, it's a it's basically just a simple algorithm that tells Python how to iterate through something. In this case, how to iterate through something backwards. So that's all it does. It just maps the elements in reverse order, but it doesn't do that in order to create a list. It just says, well, if I were going to go through this list backwards, this is how I'd do it, which is really simple, right? So it's this little thing in memory that just tells Python how to go through the list backwards. So, yeah. imagine if I had a list with, I don't know, 1,000,000 or so records in it, 1,000,000 or so objects in it, numbers or strings or whatever. In the grand scheme of things, it's not actually that huge, but it's sizable. It's enough. It's quite a chunk. If I did reversed and it gave me back a full copy of the list that just happened to be in opposite order, then I would have just arbitrarily doubled my memory footprint, right? So I have one list with 1,000,000 objects, and then I reverse it to get another list with 1,000,000 objects in it. This way, no matter how big my list is, it's still just the same, like, well, this is how you go through the list backwards, which seems almost trivially simple. Like, why wouldn't Python know how to do that? Well, it does. You use the reverse function, and that's how it knows how to do that, right? So regardless of the size of the list, whether it's a tiny little list or a giant list, a reversed iterator object is always the same size, so it's more efficient. And the reason this is useful is, say I want to run a for loop through my list. We'll say for L element in list. Okay, so I'm going to run forward through my list. Print element. I don't know. Okay, 435. No big surprises there. But let's say I wanted to iterate backwards through my list, which is something that is really common. It's not uncommon to have a problem where you want to iterate through something in reverse order, right? So I don't have to duplicate my list and reproduce a whole other thing just so I can iterate through it in reverse order and then never use that again. So I can do this 534. And this doesn't take basically, essentially, it doesn't take up any extra memory, right? Just a little tiny reverse iterator object. Yeah, memory constraints. So funny thing is, there's a number of ways to reverse a list. There's this way, which is what you should do if you're using a for loop. Reverse past tense. Okay. There's a method though. There's the list.reverse method. Okay. So here's the thing. Let me do this, because this might be a little confusing with all that output there. So that's the reversed function. Reversed method. Reverse method, excuse me. Let me see, I'll print this out. So I'm going to print this out. We get none, right? It looks weird because you expect it to be reversed, right? So I'll print the list and then I'll print the reverse. Nothing happens. So the method actually causes a mutation in the list. It works differently. So again, this won't duplicate the memory, but it will take a little CPU up front. If you have a really big list, it's not a complex operation to reverse something. It's kind of like a sort, like a very, very, very light, simple sort. It's not a huge amount of CPU, but maybe it could add up if you're doing it a lot and if you're doing it on large objects. But it actually changes the value of the list to be in its reverse form. So if we look, I create the list and print it off just to see what its initial state is. 435, no big surprise there. That's how I created it. Then I call reverse. Notice reverse gives me back none. Reverse doesn't give me back a reverse value. It changes the value to be in its reverse form. Then I print off list and I see the reverse list, right? So if you want to make that change permanent to the list, you can do the reverse method. The reverse function is reverse said, past tense. The reverse method is just reverse. What is that? Infinitive? Present tense? I don't know. Then there's yet another way, and this way is cool, but it does actually cause a memory duplication. So it's really, I would say, it's only suitable for small lists, and that is the slice way. So we can do a reverse slice. So this actually gives us it back a different object that is the list in its reversed form. So you could do that if you want it, but I won't dive too deep into that. We're going to talk about slicing more when we get into lists. Cool. Forward list. Forward list is list reversed backwards list. Yep, exactly. Cool. Nice. All right. Looks like everybody's good to go there. I'm just gonna, hey, since we talked about putting everything in your notes document, every time I do a stream or Code Wars problem, every time I'm doing any coding, aside from being on Replit where I can have a shared environment with somebody, I'm working out of my environment here. So we're wrapping up now. I have all this code. I'll select it and copy it, and then I'll come to my notes document, and then this is kind of the beginning of my notes document here, and I'll just paste it in. And there I've got a bunch of stuff. So, if one of you all comes to me and asks me like, hey, remember when we went through that thing in study hall? I'll be like, nope, but my text editor does. And then I can go look it up and be like, oh yeah, now I remember. Once I see the code, I'll probably remember. So, yeah, that's how you use your notes document. That's how I use it. Awesome. Well, it's been fun. This is a fun study hall. I hope to see you all back for the next one. Next one will be on Friday. And yeah, if you're interested in doing an environment setup study hall, I don't want to do it like right away because I want to give people kind of an opportunity to kind of figure it out themselves. I kind of think it's one of those things that it's worth kind of pushing through. I don't mind helping people. I like it. But it's one of those things that if I hold, it's one of those things where I notice if I hold somebody's hand too much, it's like at the end of the day, like eventually you're going to need to know how to like set up your own environment. So I don't want it to be painful and feel impossible. So I'm totally willing to help. But yeah, I want to just wait on it a little bit. So if you do want support with that, if you do want help with that, DM me or mention it in the class thread somewhere, or just at me in this channel, in the study hall channel, and say like, hey, I'm just voting for environment setup. And if there's enough interest, I will probably do it at some point next week. I anticipate that there will be sufficient interest, and I'll do it maybe next Wednesday or Friday, maybe Monday. I don't know. Yeah, let me know if you'd be interested in that, or if you have another idea about a study hall topic that you'd like to cover. I'm definitely open for suggestions and feedback for study halls, and I want to make these as good as they can be. So cool. Thanks again for showing up, and I'll see you next time. If you're in premium prep, I'll see you in a couple hours. Yeah. All right. Bye bye.